Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today's session. And today I wanted to share with you a little bit about financial fluency for the product leaders, because I feel like within the last couple of years, this topic became really important because a lot of things have changed in the world. Not everybody from the product side has been able to jump quickly on this kind of new way of working. So before we dive into this, a few words about me. I'm currently a Chief Product Officer at a company called Spryker. So we are a B2B digital commerce platform, so B2B software. I also do a lot of other things in order for me to sharpen my knowledge and understand how our things are actually working. So I also have a small startup that I'm running on the side, which actually helps me understand if I'm making the right decisions and how quickly those decisions actually translate into something that you can sell to the customers, because it's really easy to get out of touch of it. I also mentor and advise people who are starting their product management careers or just building product software. And in case you're wondering which part of Texas my accent is from, I'm from Ukraine, so that's not a Texan accent. All right, so with that, so let's get started. So today, we're going to try to have it a little bit as a practical exercise. So have your phones ready. There's not going to be that many questions, but I do want you to participate in this practical exercise. So as we all, as product managers and product leaders, when we need to make a decision, we are always thinking about which one should we actually prioritize, which one should we go after. And there were two features that I had on the slide. Maybe if we can go back for a second. So the feature A, capability, and we skip the strategy and how did we arrive to those things. That is not going to be as important right now. So let's say there's two capabilities that you need to decide, and you operate in the world of limited capacity, which suddenly happens often. So the first capability is going to be the dashboard upgrade. So imagine that you work in B2B software. I know there is that dashboard where the company would be able to see a lot of data about their business. And that is not going to be something that you would be able to win new business. You would not be able to expand into new territory. But it's something that you believe is going to help increase customer adoption, probably prevent some churn as well. And then, separately, we already heard about the importance of integrations. I know there's a new integration that you hear from everybody in sales. I know you see, you hear from sales that they are losing deals because of it. I know you feel like that is going to be something that needs to be done in order to expand to the new markets. So now you need to decide which one are you actually going to be building. Resources are limited, so for now you can do only one. So let's go with which one would you build? All right. Well, so for now, we see that feature A, which is dashboard upgrade, which, as we remember, we're talking about not necessarily winning new markets. It's something that we're doing for our existing customer base, maybe probably to prevent churn a little bit. So now the question is it the right decision? How would you know? And most importantly, in the time of the limited resources and the market conditions that we saw within the last couple of years, how do you actually arrive to the question or to the answer to this question? And what we see a lot, and we heard already today that a lot, that typically those decisions are either being made by intuition, gut feelings. I know somebody may be a little bit more attached to idea. There is executive pressure. I don't know if I'm the only one who lives in that world, but I know that happens a lot when your CEO is in love with a certain integration because he met that person somewhere at the party, and now you need to have that integration for sure, and it's going to be great. And there's also customer feedback. A lot of customers are saying that, well, I know if that doesn't happen, then that's the end of this partnership. I'm going to be moving on. However, the question is, while as product managers, our responsibility is to build products that customers love, we also need to build them in a way that is financially viable to the company, because we're ultimately, at the end of the day, building products that need to make money. Yes, customers need to love them, and you need to be able to sell something to the customer. They would only buy if they love it, but the financial viability is one of the most important things because we're actually playing here business. So how do you actually do this? So I wanted to walk you through some of the ways how we do it at my company. And it's not the perfect framework, but I just wanted to get a little bit more practical and show you how to actually do it, so then we don't just talk about, oh, you need to look at the value, but you actually get an example of how you can actually get to the value. So there's 5 different things that we typically look at when we analyze which capability to work on. So the first, imagine that you have not just 2 features, how we saw on the slide, but you actually have, I don't know, 30, 50, hundreds of different ideas, and now you need to make decisions, which ones do you want to work on? So how do you do that? Do you actually go and calculate TAM, SAM, how do you get to revenue projections? So how do you actually understand, of all of those 50 ideas, which ones you want to dive deeper? There's obviously the market validation, revenue priorities, cost and pricing, ROI, and payback. All of that is important. So let's get a little bit more practical. So I wanted to show you, this is actually, I stripped out the details of specific capabilities, but I wanted to show you a real framework of how we actually look at the capabilities. So when you think about all of those different capabilities, there's a couple of different questions that you should be asking yourself. So first one, would it actually help you get better with your competition and innovation? Is it something that is going to make a difference? And it's a similar framework to what Gail was talking about from Merge, but it kind of like takes it to the next level. So you need to understand of, okay, if I'm actually going to do this capability, how much my competition is going to change. If you are also in B2B enterprise software where you actually have your sales team going after, and it's not just a pure product-led growth, you also need to understand what is going to be your win rate. And even maybe in PLG, that is going to be applicable. Also, most of the time, customers come to your product because they want to start realizing the value of it. So it's not because you want to get to the product, they need to start getting the value. So what is that time to value? How quickly can somebody get up and running with your product, whatever service you're offering? There's a lot of others that is a little bit more specific to my domain, like digital commerce, where we also look at the number of orders and the volume of transactions that go through our platform, because it's important for us to monetize that customer base as well. There is a gross retention rate. There is also additional revenue opportunities, because maybe you're going to be adding a new capability that will allow you to generate another revenue stream. And obviously, you look at your implementation efforts. The thing that is really important here is that this is a framework that you can use together across the company. So don't look at it as just your internal product management thing that you do in a silo within product management team. You see there that at the top, I have different departments and also the weighting scores. And you need to understand at any given moment of time when you set the strategy, which KPIs are actually important at this given moment of time. Are you struggling right now with win rates? Or do you actually struggle with the fact that customers come to your product because they're interested in what you actually present from the marketing perspective, but the time to value is so huge that they give up, never actually starting to monetize, never becoming a paid, real paid customer to you? Is it the competition that actually picked up and now it's more important to pick up that game? And you can see here that there's additional teams that at the top that need to be weighing in. And you can also play with scoring. So it shouldn't be that abstract number where you set something and you okay, so this is going to be 20%, 10%. You have the scores, but then you also weigh them in depending on the state of the company that you are currently in. So what it does for you, it actually allows you to understand what are the different, from all of those features, all of those capabilities, initiatives, however you call them, what are those things that are going to be likely, based on this high-level analysis, you should be able to pick up in order to make a significant difference. But also, most importantly, you have done it not in isolation, where you just weigh in your own perspective. You went to sales, you went to marketing, you went to somebody else, and you collaboratively arrived to that. When we did that exercise at Spryker, the company that I work for, we actually in the spreadsheet, kind of where we had those cells, I know each department went in and said, well, I know you put here 5, I believe it's going to be 3, and this is why, and I strongly believe that this is not going to increase the win rate, that therefore we should not be doing it. And like it helped us understand where do we need to have those conversations. So I highly encourage you to do that. But as I said, like, this is just a framework, so you should be looking at it as just a concept of how you might arrive to something that is a little bit more tangible, but also adjust it to your other priorities. So for example, here we see that there's a lot of other factors that all of you are considering when making product decisions. So from does customer need it, value to the user, risks is really important, maintenance cost, NPS. So any of those things, as long as you agree within the company on the framework, are gonna work. So now let's go back to those 2 features that we talked about at the beginning, and let's think through them and kind of try to understand which of those features you should be able, or we should be prioritizing now. So I wanted to, I filled out basically based on kind of how I imagine in this abstract B2B software company this can look like. So for example, here you see that there is a dashboard upgrade, and we believe that the cost of building it is going to be the same. So we're not going to be looking at like, oh, this is easier to build, that's why that's a quick win, so let's go for it. So we're not looking for the simple answers here. So what we see here that one is not necessarily giving you additional revenue stream. Another one, is helping with competition. Another one is not, because this new enterprise integration is a table stakes and everybody kind of expects to have it. But this new kind of dashboard capability is something that you believe is going to make a difference for your customers. So even here, kind of in this weighting scoring, you can see that one feature is leading versus the other one. Again, in case you have many of them, you would be able to sort out some of them when you've done it collaboratively that you don't even need to focus on. Another thing that is obviously now important, once you get your short list, this is an absolutely known screenshot here, the model that all of you know by now. So you need to understand your TAM, your SAM, your SUM. However, the question typically is, how do you actually get this data? And that's something that a lot of product managers that I work with and I mentor, they ask these questions like, yes, everybody talks about it, but where do I actually get the data? And how would I know how many customers are there? And the thing is that you typically get this data from some of those reputable sources, but also what you need to understand is you ultimately going after that last smaller circle. And that's kind of where you need to have your sales and marketing team to weigh in and say, based on the number of customers that we have in the pipeline right now, this is how many we believe we would be able to win if we had this capability, one or the other. So basically going back to what we saw in the previous step, your win rate. But now you're not talking about just abstract numbers, 1 to 5. You're trying to get that number of like, okay, in my pipeline I have thousands of customers. Maybe with this new capability I would be able to win 5% of them, and that actually gives you that number. Similarly to all of the other capabilities as well. Now, so we have that, and kind of like it gave us some ideas for that capability. Now we need to think about, okay, so we are building those 2 capabilities now. Maybe you want to actually have those capabilities included out of the box and you don't need to charge for them. But many companies and a lot of the strategies that we see is like for each capability, there's going to be a different revenue model that you can use. So for example, let's say maybe for the feature A capability, you actually don't want to give it for free because not every single customer needs it. Maybe it's going to be that BI place kind of where customers can do a little bit of data deep dive, and you actually want to offer that for a certain price. And then for the feature B, which was this enterprise integration, is also something that not everybody needs. So maybe that is also going to be an additional thing. Or maybe some of them is going to be for free, and then you kind of need to figure out what is going to be the ROI that you would expect. But all of that is really important that you need to be considering early on to understand how you're actually going to be making money on it. And then also in the current economy, understanding how do you actually get to the payback and ROI is really important. So let's imagine that we actually kind of went with those two models and kind of again wanted to show you this really simple breakdown, but obviously it can get much higher or much more complicated. But let's say kind of this has been your inputs that you decided to do collaboratively with your go-to-market teams. So you're saying that capability A is going to be subscription model. I know you're thinking that it's going to be, both of those capabilities are going to be charged for. Enterprise integration is going to be usage-based because maybe it's depending on the amount of data that is going through. And you also get this data from your sales and marketing team on how many customers they would be able to offer it to based on their typical win rates, based on the customer base that is likely going to be applicable to it. And that kind of like gives you now some numbers. So you have 1 million for one capability, 750 for another one. Maybe this is actually the good, I don't know, now you have a little bit more tangible data. You can have conversations with your CFOs. And maybe that's going to be enough for you to have the conversation. However, what we also started seeing within the last couple of years, especially working with investors and the boards, that obviously even this type of analysis is already better than nothing. I know it's better than talking about the features that customers love and how people complain about not having something, but it still doesn't get you into the room and to have the same level of conversation. Everybody at the moment right now is interested in ROI and payback. And sometimes they're not, but also all of that is going to be very significantly based on the stage of the company, based on the financial health of the company, and what is kind of the future aspirations that the leadership or the board has for the company. So another thing that typically kind of when I have a conversation with our board, so they ask us, when we talk about those capabilities, when would we break even? So when would we start getting some payback? And that was also kind of a really simplistic model to show to you how you can actually try to get closer to it. So for example, let's say you have your estimated revenue, but that didn't account for any of your implementation efforts. It also didn't account for maintenance efforts. For simplicity, I try to keep both the same. But even with that, you already start seeing that your ROI and your payback period is different. And maybe that is something that you need to be considering when you decide across those two features, or maybe in your case, it's more than two, which capabilities you want to go after. And I can guarantee that if you start even with this kind of simple way of trying to bring a little bit more data, your conversations with your financial department, with your FP&A teams are going to become much easier because that is going to be something that they would be interested in. So now, we're actually getting closer to the final decision. So now we walk through how, in practical steps, you can start tapping a little bit into the world of financial kind of implications of certain product decisions. So let's go back to the same features. So we have those two capabilities right now, but now we understand that they are not just kind of those kind of capabilities that we talked about at the beginning. One is for existing customers, and another one is for extending kind of the market offering. But now you also have your ROI and your payback periods. So which of those two, now having some data points, whether correct or not, would you choose? So now it's time for you to use your Slido again. Right. We start seeing that our new enterprise integration is definitely losing the game for now. It was not necessarily, majority of people were not necessarily in favor of doing that anyways, but now with data. Huh? All right. 93/7. Well, definitely now, even kind of when we look at those answers here, we see that the answers have changed. So something have changed because you actually started thinking about something else. Again, it's not necessarily about the accuracy of what kind of data we looked at and whether or not our assumptions were correct, but we can see that even your decisions here in the room after 10 minutes have changed. So now, let's go back to the slides. So the final takeaways is that you can actually go for the feature A or feature B, considering some of those implications. But the honest answer is that even that is not enough. All of those answers are going to be highly dependent, as I already mentioned, on the state of your company. Are you profitable or not? Do you actually need to get to profitability in a short period of time? When talking to your finance department, are they trying to conserve cash and therefore they're looking for the shorter payback with the higher chances of actually getting that payback as soon as possible? Or maybe you are actually well-funded right now and financial health of the company is outstanding and you can actually invest in something that is going to be a little bit more aspirational. It's also going to significantly depend on whether you're public or private company. Are you self-funded or you're actually using some VC money? Because all of those capabilities, as well as your strategy that you set for the company of where do you want to be strategically, is going to influence also which capabilities you're going to be choosing here. So the takeaway from kind of what I was trying to show you is that it's absolutely important to build the products that customers love, while still trying to be financially viable for the company, because most of us are playing in a business game and we're building something that is supposed to make money for the company, and the more money we make, the better. That's why it's absolutely important to apply the financial lenses to how we make those decisions, but also not to be just purely focused on spreadsheets and numbers, but also understand how all of that is going to be tied to the broader strategy, to the broader financial state of the company. So then you can understand, even when you arrive to certain features, maybe that new enterprise integration is going to be the right thing because it's actually going to help you, for example, let's say it will help your company to become listed on AWS Marketplace, and that is going to be a game changer for the company. And maybe payback is not as important because that is going to be opening up so much more opportunity aspirationally to you that you didn't think about before. So if you want to learn more kind of in financial fluency, when I was preparing for this conversation, and mostly because I also guide my team and also wanted to up-level my understanding of how to look at this, there were not that many resources available, but I went through pretty much everything that I was able to find. And those are the 4 resources that I found really helpful. So all of those are links. You can totally reach out to me after. Would be happy to share the slide deck with you, as well as the links, or just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll share that as well. And always happy to share my thoughts. I do share a lot of kind of my observations and a lot of the things that are happening in the product management world, but always tied back to what exactly I'm doing practically. So always happy to share my insights, connect, and then if you would like to have that list of resources or the presentation itself, just reach out to me and just mention that it was kind of from this conference specifically. And now, happy to answer your questions.
Yes, thank you, Elena.
All right, so now let's go through questions. What are some ways you have found successful in establishing and maintaining your sources of truth for this analysis? Well, it's an excellent question. The sources of truth is hard. That's why I really like kind of that when we looked at the spreadsheet with different sources, because you can actually go a little bit with more qualitative feedback at the beginning when you don't have the sources, like when you don't have that all factual data. Because a lot of people, like when we typically read about like TAM, SAM, and like win rates and all of it, like we feel like we immediately now for the backlog of 50 different ideas need to go and get that data, which is hard. But even at that level, when you start kind of talking about kind of like let's actually score those 10 capabilities, and you get different perspectives between product and marketing or product and sales, or your marketing team starts arguing with your sales team, which is the best thing ever when it doesn't involve the product person. You actually start seeing how different, like what kind of different assumptions they are. And then kind of from there, then you can go a little bit deeper into understanding kind of, okay, now we believe that those 5 ideas are the most solid. Let's take a look at our customer base, at our pipeline, at our historical win rates, and kind of start building the models from there. Analysis says A, executive passionately believes in B, mutually exclusive, one one-way door, how to proceed. Well, I think it's kind of here, I would say it's absolutely important to understand why your executive passionately believes in B. Because typically what I found in my experience that certain people will be passionate about something, but it's not going to be baked at the same data point. So kind of typically what helps me and what I would suggest you to do the same is to understand what are the reasons why somebody is passionate, and then what are the reasons why you're less passionate, and kind of understand where do you actually compare. So what are the sources of difference, and maybe there is an important factor that should have been considered by you or maybe by executive, but you have not been able to see it from their lenses as well. How do you control, validate ROI calculations which rely heavily on subjective revenue projections? Excellent question. So how do you do that? Well, revenue projection is a revenue projection in itself, so it's a projection. So it always has a little bit of room for being incorrect. So that's the first thing that you need to remember. The second part, which I would recommend, is now when you actually have kind of that type of overview, as you launch the new capability, or also depending what type of product you're building, if you can start building a pipeline ahead of time, like while you're building the product, you can start seeing, you can start understanding whether that ROI projection is going to be accurate or not, whether your revenue projection is going to be accurate or not. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that you need to keep that in mind, and then go back to it as you come closer to the launch period of time. And kind of that will help you build this muscle memory for the future launches and for the future initiatives to understand how accurate you typically are. Because if most of the time you're absolutely inaccurate, then no, there's probably a bigger problem. If you're inaccurate by 20%, then you start basically applying that percentage as an error. All right, next question. When developing a prioritization scorecard, do you recommend using the same scorecard for several products or customizing the scorecard per product? Well, excellent question as well. So here I would suggest that what you need to do is to look at, so the scorecard needs to serve a purpose of the business. So it starts with what is your business, what are the KPIs that you're actually trying to focus on right now. And kind of you first have that conversation with your leadership team, stakeholders, whoever is making decision. If all of your products kind of follow the same logic, for example, in my case, we have multiple products in our portfolio, but they all kind of serving the same purpose. So then we use the same scorecard for everything. But if you have a portfolio of a little bit disjointed products, then obviously it would make sense to change it. But I think kind of what you need to remember that scorecard is not the answer in itself. It's actually a tool to start the conversation, to understand what is important to the business, involve others to take an active role in that, and then only then it becomes a useful tool. Because if it's just a product-only tool, it's no different than anything else that you would be doing, kind of whether it's a RISE or any kind of value to engineering efforts prioritization. All right. Next question. How do you quantify ROI work that is prioritized to raise NPS? Yeah, great question. So NPS is a great metric as well that we look at and historically I also looked at. But I personally found, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but like in product strategy, I've been struggling with NPS to understand how to apply it to the business. Because NPS is supposed to be kind of this kind of quantitative but qualitative feedback that allows you to understand how your customers feel about it, but like you cannot directly apply it to the product's like business strategy. And it changed for me the moment when I started looking at NPS in correlation to the net revenue retention and the churn rate. So you need to understand, so if you have this NPS and then you have your churn rate and you have your net revenue retention, are there any correlations between that? And then kind of then you go back to your ROI work or priorities, and then you can say, well, okay, so like now we see the low NPS, it's likely gonna start impacting our churn rates or net revenue retention, and therefore we need to do X, Y, and Z. Because if you have a conversation with your financial officer about NPS, you're likely never gonna actually reach any agreements because for them it's not something that actually justifiable in terms of where to allocate resources. And I believe that we're at time.
Yeah, we're at
Thank you
time.
so much for your
Yes,
time.
thanks, Elena.